Welcome, hello, everybody, to the first lecture of the first week of the rest of your life. No, just kidding. Of MERN. We are getting started. My name is Will Calhoun. I will be your instructor for this. For these next 8 weeks, the first 6 weeks are going to be really prepping us for the exam. And then after, that's when our week 6 will start. And then after that, we'll have a couple fun things that we'll do for the last 2 weeks to prepare you on your next step of your journey, whether that is projects and algorithms, if that's another language, if that's another stack of Python or Java, we will be able to prep you there. So it'll be really, really, really fun. Today's very basic. I've sort of I'm going to talk a little bit more theory and be a little bit heavier in what is a full stack application. How is MERN different than Java and Python? If you've already taken those, some of those of you that were in the office hour, I'm so sorry. There's going to be some redundancy. There's going to be some sort of repetitiveness and what I say, but there are quite a few things that I want to get to and state, so that way we can talk to and kind of prepare you. First, we'll start with our introductions, and then we're going to go. I do a little bit of housekeeping. Every single class I will do this. I love to remind you guys what is due. That way it can never be like, oh, I didn't know. Not in a like, oh, you should have known, but more so always like to remind you, because if you're anything like me, then sometimes you can do things or just space. Like I can't remember how many times. Every time I brush my teeth, I say, oh, I need to get a new toothbrush head. And then as soon as I leave, it's gone forever in my brain. So I like to constantly remind you. That way, if you need to write it down or something, you'll have tons of information. Before we do that, again, my name is Will Calhoun. I am your instructor. I have a little bit of here's my background. My background is in marketing and economics. So you might say, well, Will, how did you get into this? Well, my wife and I moved up to Seattle 5 years ago, and seeing everybody here in Seattle and sort of coding and, transparently what coding can provide for you, I realized, wow, there might be a switch here. And what I actually did, it was my little journey, was I spoke with my wife and said, hey, I think I want to learn how to code. And before I dove into a boot camp, I actually got a Udemy course. And it was like a full stack web development by Angela Yu. It was awesome. She rocked. And I said, wow, I really, really like this. And so I just jumped in. I'm actually a product of Coding Dojo. And so that is just a testament that it does work. After Coding Dojo, I became a teaching assistant, and then I was an instructor for this program, launched the Python Flask program, taught the prior program before that. I moved over to data science, helped launch that program, and sort of from the operations side, build that up. I left Coding Dojo actually to go work at a company called Twilio. Some of you guys might be familiar with Twilio. I was a customer success engineer. I'm really passionate that there's more roles out in the tech field than just dev roles. So if you find yourself, like having a hard time finding a job, please talk, like, let's chat, because there's tons of different avenues that I didn't know about. I always thought, okay, I learned how to code, I have to be a dev. There's so many jobs that if you just have a little bit of knowledge, you can make good amount of money, and you maybe are not a dev, but you can do things that are sort of better for how you operate. Solutions engineers, solution architects. I have a good buddy who's in sales at a company called Snowflake, which is a data lake, and he's really, he knows how to code to a small degree, but he's really personable. So if you love that, if you love talking with people, that's like I love that. I love talking. That's why I came back to teaching and kind of walking through that. You can do that. Jennifer, great call out. Technical project managers, there's success engineers. I mean, there's so many things. So I was with Twilio, and then I actually left Twilio, which is a common theme in the tech world, just unfortunately, is that you leave, and then every time you leave, kind of get a pay increase and a whole bunch of stuff with that. But actually am a software engineer with a company, and recently came back to just come back and teach, because while I was a software engineer, I would also, I've always been connected. Oh, I'm so sorry. There's a big loud noise. I've always been connected with Coding Dojo. I was a TA just for fun, because I really actually do enjoy teaching. And so as a TA, even after I left, I just kind of came, and then I would teach this thing called Intro to Python, which is something that Coding Dojo does. And just came back because I love this. This gives me a lot of life. And so I have some experience out in the industry. And so if you have any questions on what that looks like, please feel free. I love to talk about it. I believe the industry is great for everybody. Before we jump into Gray, I do have two things. I've got, and I am married, which is awesome. And then I have two dogs. One thing I just have to let you know, since this is our first one and we're starting off a great foot, I've got two dogs, and hopefully this never has to happen, but one of my dogs does have epilepsy. And so if there is ever a moment that she starts to have a seizure, I'll let you guys know, hey, my dog's having a seizure. Give me 1 second. It's only happened one time in one of my classes. And it usually takes about 3 to 5 minutes. So I might pause the video and then I will always come back to it. So I apologize in advance if that happens. Here are my dogs. This is the one that has seizures. Her name is Marley. She's super cute. She's 7 years old. She is got the goofiest little ears. She's a mutt. My wife got her at a gas station in Vegas. This guy was giving dogs away at like 5 weeks old. She said, "Sir, you do not need to have a dog. That's you probably shouldn't own that." So she grabbed her. She was free. The guy was just giving away. And then this is my other dog named Charlie. So Marley and Charlie. I call him Chuck. He's basically my best friend. He is awesome. He's this kindest, sweetest dog. He is a Labradoodle. He does shed everywhere. I told my wife, if we get a dog, then I want one that doesn't shed. And then she duped me, and we got this dog, and he does shed. So alas, that's how it works. Yeah, so just wanted to, again, if my dog ever does have a seizure, then I will just have to stop and let you know. But it happens maybe once a month. Again, rarely during classes, but she also does have a little bit of anxiety. And so if she is barking, I might I kind of lock her up in my loft. That's what maybe that big loud noise was the baby gate crashing. But she does bark again, I might just go on pause. I'm sorry. She's tough to live with, but we love her. So our teaching assistant is the infamous goat of teaching assistants, is Justina Gray, goes by Gray. Gray, do you want to maybe introduce yourself a little bit?
Hey, y'all. I'm Tia Gray. Most of y'all, some of you know me. I've had y'all either in not projects, either in web fundamentals or in Python, or you just came to me for help in the dojo hall. Hello. Hey. So glad, a lot of you guys are here. I started with Coding Dojo back in December 2020. I wanted to also do a career transition. I actually came from human services / customer service, more in a psychology background. And I actually wanted to transition because I wanted to actually create apps for the industry. I was like, these apps are trash. Why? Like, what's really going on? So during COVID, I made the plunge, and I went to Coding Dojo after like interviewing with so many boot camps, and Coding Dojo won, obviously. And so now I'm here. I learned Django at first, and then MERN. And I worked as a little bit as a web dev, and I realized I didn't like it because my background was a little bit more in research. And I didn't know there was a thing called data science. I'm like, wait, what? Because when I was in the program, they didn't have the data science program. So I think they literally probably just launched it while I was already in it. So it's okay. Everything happens for a reason. So now I'm trying to transition more into data science, and I like anything data. And but still into my web development skills, because it's also pretty important. User interface is pretty important. So that's currently what I'm doing, upskilling to next steps. But I'm trained in mostly Flask and JavaScript. I know a little bit of Java. But yeah, I'm excited to be back here with Will. I'm going to be learning some of the things they have that he's been working on. So I'm glad to be with you all. Please ask your questions. I'm curious. Show me a thing or two if you want to teach me. And I'm happy to like have, Gray's hour where, hey, I'm learning a new concept. I just want to share it with you all. And that's pretty, I don't have any animals. I was thinking about it, but I don't have any anymore. But it's okay. So it's just me in my apartment. But that's a little bit about me.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, I'm a New Yorker, by the way. If you can tell by the accent.
Yeah.
I don't live in New York anymore, but I'm still a New Yorker. But yeah.
Never leaves you. Yeah. If just so you guys know, Gray is way too humble. Gray is awesome. And when I was still staying on as a TA, Gray was sort of the pseudo TA lead. So anything that you need, they can answer, and it's going to be awesome. But Gray also said something that I really value is, though I have worked with MERN for a very long time now, and though Gray is knowledgeable in all of this information, there's going to be things that we don't know, right? And just so you know, that's okay. You're never expected to know everything. There's a very common joke that even senior devs or principal engineers will Google how to center a div. I mean, you just aren't supposed to know everything all the time. So there might be something that you guys can teach us, or you might ask a question that I don't know the answer to, and that's okay. That I'm very okay with not knowing, unless it's like a basic, how do you declare a variable, right? But if it is some sort of abstract thing, that's okay. We can learn together and grow. So I hope that this class is something that we can grow in and continue to learn. Cool. A little bit of housekeeping. Actually, before we do some housekeeping, if you guys can, because it is always good to have sort of a connector on understanding where people are at and what people are doing. So if maybe in the chat, I know you already did if you did the office hour, but put where you're from, maybe where you're from. And if you had to have dinner with one person, could be alive or dead, who would it be? Put that in the chat so that way maybe we can get to know one another through that. Where you're from, and if you had to have dinner with one person that could be past or present, who would it be? Lots of people. Betty White. Einstein would be great. Except though I don't know that I would understand a word of what Einstein said. Lots of fun people. Seth Rogen would be hilarious. Your grandma, I hear that. That's really sentimental. Wow, you guys are very like well. Somebody, Dwayne, we're gonna get there. You guys are really like, well, some people, I don't know, you have all kinds of crazy things, but like Leonardo da Vinci, Einstein, you guys are awesome. Way to go. You're all well versed. So that's really fun. Cool. Thanks for doing that. Thanks for entertaining that question. I know that sometimes these, getting to know people can be weird, or you already get to know people or something of that nature. So thanks for entertaining that. Cool. So just a few things. Like I said, I'll always do housekeeping. And so just as a reminder, your discussion questions are due by 11:59 p.m. Sunday, February 12th. They are open, so you should see them. Somebody did notice that there were some all the way for the first 4 weeks. Discussion questions are open. Do with that what you will. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But please note that this is a compliance thing. It's a way that we can track, technically, just to get in the nitty gritty. In order for us to operate, we have to have some sort of attendance structure. And so this qualifies for our attendance structure. And so if you don't do these, then it counts as attendance. And this is like for us to operate in states thing. And so if it shows that you missed too many classes, or you lack attendance, then unfortunately you can't move forward. I do want to note also, I made an error in our email yesterday. So please know, I said that if you miss more than 3, then that means for academic dismissal. That's what it used to be. It is now 5. So if you miss 5 discussion questions, you will have to retake the course, even if you have a black belt on your exam, even if you've done every core assignment. There's nothing I can do about that, unfortunately. You can miss up to 4, but please, just knock it out. They're the easiest thing in the world. So the first 4 weeks are open. I would encourage you to just don't even worry about it. Don't play Russian roulette with that. Like, just go knock them out. There's no, just go knock them out. You've got 3 core assignments that we will, throughout our lectures today, tomorrow, and Thursday, talk about. We are going to talk about convert to arrow today. We're going to talk about arrow functions. Believe we're going to get there. I don't think we're going to get to destructuring today, which is okay. Today is ideally just supposed to be light, just an introduction to the course, but not quite a syllabus day, because those are the worst. And then prop it up, which will be our Thursday lecture. Before we jump in, I want to talk about a couple really key tools that I would encourage you guys to go through or to make sure that you know about. So I just want to make sure that we know those. First one's going to be Discord, as always. Discord is going to be a great tool for how we communicate. What we are doing. If you have questions, Discord's going to be the place that you want to ask those. Something we talked about in the office hour, which is really important. My encouragement to you as the instructor is Dojo Hall is a tool that you can use and you can jump in and you can get help immediately, right? I would encourage you to, though that feels the easiest, to not do that. Here's the reason why. Post the question in Discord and see if somebody can help you. Oftentimes, when I was a TA, and Gray can attest to this, oftentimes you can actually get help pretty quickly just through messaging. So even if a TA is busy with the student, they might see your question and know the answer quickly and can give you that. So therefore, it helps your time. So you're not having to wait in line at Dojo Hall. And then all of a sudden a TA be like, yeah, I could have done that in 3 minutes. B, it allows for your cohort members to also chime in. One of the best ways to reinforce the knowledge that you have is to then go and teach it, because you see sort of where the gaps are, or you sort of gain a better understanding. And so asking it in Discord will help that. It'll help your cohort mates. And it also, again, will help you get help faster. The last thing about that is, as part of the job that you will have as a developer, if that's the route you go, or anything, success engineer, lots of things, right? You will have to problem solve. And there is often there's often not time to like, or there's often, sorry, not a person to go and just ask immediately. Thanks, Caitlin. That's awesome. That just will have the answer. You're gonna have to figure it out anyway. Now that means we have the 20-minute rule, so please adhere to that. If it takes you more than 20 solid minutes of looking and trying to figure out, and you feel like you're not getting ground, that's kind of the only alter I would say, is that if in 20 minutes you don't have it figured out, but you're learning and you're growing, I would extend that 20 minutes by another 10 or 15. And then maybe after that, but if you haven't made any progress after 20 minutes, then you go in and you ask. And the whole point is, guys, I can't tell you how many times on the job, if I'm integrating a chatbot, or if I am trying to use this API to automate shipping labels for a customer, I don't have anybody that can go ask and say, how does this API work? I have to figure it out, right? And so I would encourage you, that is going to be a huge portion of the job. So post it in Discord, try to learn it, and then go to Dojo Hall. I just hope that, obviously if you need help immediately, Dojo Hall is available. That's what it's for, but that's my 2 cents for that. Thank you, Jonathan, for photobombing. Love that. The other thing that is going to be probably even more important is going to be our daily schedule. Here, this is our Google Class sheet. You should have all gotten an email from me on Monday. And then I've also put this in our Discord, which if you have never done the pinned message, if you just come, this is our class. If you just come to this little pin right here, then it'll have all the information you need quickly. So Zoom links, our course calendar, one-on-ones, et cetera, et cetera. This is our course calendar. This is sort of your true north point. This is where all of your information is going to be. If you have a one-on-one, if you need a one-on-one specifically with me, like you have something with the class, or you just have some questions for specifically me, you can come right here. Just transparently, my schedule is pretty full. So if times don't work for you, or if I don't have time, say you need help today and I don't have time until Thursday, or I do have time, but it's a time that doesn't work for you, you can go right here to this one-on-one with any instructor. And what that does is allows you to pick the time. And if I'm available, it's basically a pool of instructors. And so if I'm available, it might be me, but it might be another instructor who is knowledgeable and can help you. So please utilize this one, because it will be, you're welcome to set up a one-on-one with me, but this will be sort of the best case for your schedule. We also have our lecture Zoom link. By tonight, yeah, I guess we have a little bit of code. We'll post our cohort GitHub repo. So I'll put a link there. We just haven't created it because we haven't done anything yet. Same thing with our lecture recordings. And then what will also happen is these guys right here will be populated or linked to the recording on YouTube. So this will be the YouTube playlist, and these will be the specific ones as well. just as a reminder, you can look at the lectures as well on here. So if you guys are wanting to do lectures, you'll have, they're going to be here, and I'll populate right here on this guy, and it'll be my lecture. And since we're the only cohort that's currently happening, it'll always be on the top for you. Cool. Any questions on this? Any questions on Discord? Any questions on the Google Class sheet? You guys all, even if it's not your first stack, so it's not web fund, so it's a little bit more basic. You guys probably have some experience in this, but are there any questions? Cool. One thing I'll typically say is put a 1 in the chat if this all makes sense. Put a 0 if it does not. And then anywhere in between that can help. Yeah, I'm not quite done with the important tools, but thanks for noticing that. Cool. Great. Everybody's gotten it. So we are good to go. A couple other important tools that I want to talk about. First one is Node.js. It is in here. So Node.js is what we're going to need to run Node. We're going to use Code Runner at the very beginning, but then as we start doing things, and especially once we start doing our backend and our front end servers, really just for our backend, we're going to need to have Node downloaded. So please make sure that you download Node, have it downloaded. Somebody has a wonderful question today about which version that we need, and that will be dependent upon one of the reasons we need the version. I can't remember where it says it. Needs the version that we have is if you want to deploy at the end of the stack. Like if you want to try to get your black belt, you have to have that certain version of Node downloaded. Plus it gives access to certain things and the newer technologies and bug fixes. So I would encourage, not always have to have the newest one, because oftentimes that's like the experimental beta stuff. But you want to have sort of the most recent build that is safe for community, if you will, is often what it's called. And that's the one that, okay, we all know that this works. It has all the stuff, and we've done a lot of the bug fixes, so it's not as experimental. So cool. Code Runner is a tool that I would encourage you to download. You don't have to. You can. You just come here on VS Code. I do use VS Code. I know some people were talking about IntelliJ and WebStorm and all that stuff. I don't use that. You can. It's a little bit lighter weight for VS Code. And also, I don't really want to pay for an IDE. You're welcome to use whatever you want, but I will be using VS Code. In VS Code, there's an extension that you can download. You just come here and you type Code Runner. And it will come up this guy right here. Always whenever you are dealing. Oh, no. See? Whoa, I was about to say something. And then even here. Anytime you're dealing with this stuff, you always want to see how many downloads and how many stars. So this is a great example of this is not the Code Runner that we want. Also, if it's a 1, well, it's only had 1, but 27,000 compared to 17 million. This is the one that we want. So if you want to download this, you totally can. I use it. What it's going to be great for is whenever we just want to run some code quickly, we can use this play button up here, and that'll allow us to run some JavaScript code pretty quickly. Cool. And it's obviously free. Last thing that we have is just going to address the elephant in the room. ChatGPT has recently come out, and Bard, I don't know if you guys have heard, is Google's version that's coming out very soon. They just released a blog on it yesterday. That'll come out soon. I am very pro ChatGPT. I think it is an incredible way for you to learn. I think there's a lot of things. If you guys read my email yesterday, I asked basically describe the difference between let, const, and var. And it spit out, and I said, add examples, and it spit out a whole bunch of stuff. Gray and I were messing with it today, and it did some fun things to where it, can do a lot of really cool things. And it's a wonderful tool to help you learn. That being said, there's some limitations. I can usually tell if we have a style of how we teach and how our program goes. Not that anybody has to follow that style, but that's usually what people follow. If you're doing something outrageously different, that's okay. You're welcome to do that. Just know that we do check assignments. And so if you do have some really elite code, all we might do, because this is Coding Dojo has an academic policy, academic dishonesty policy. And so if it is intense, what we might do is just say, hey, let's have a meeting, help us understand, because you maybe actually know that, right? Like maybe you did write that. We always want to give you guys the chance. but we say, hey, help us understand this code that you wrote. And if you don't understand it, then that is usually a good indication that you didn't write it. And that's what the academic dishonesty policy states, is you can't use code that you didn't write. So I am very pro you using ChatGPT to help understand. It is an incredible tool. If you guys haven't messed with it, it's awesome. And maybe we'll do an office hour of just sort of how we can use ChatGPT to help our understanding. If you have something you're confused about, why is an arrow function more efficient than a function? What are the differences? It'll be great for that sort of question. But from a code writing perspective, please know that there are limitations to it as well. At the beginning, it might help you and sort of spit out some beginner code, but it doesn't know how to connect everything. And we're going to have so many moving pieces that it'll be very, very evident to us that you are just having something else generate code. But if you don't know how to connect it, so there's two things. If you don't know how to connect it, it's never going to work, right? So beautiful code that doesn't work is still garbage code, right? And then lastly, it is very easy to use ChatGPT, and I fully understand that. My encouragement, though, is to challenge yourself and try not to, because it'll help you. You know, if you just get the answer always, you don't know how to do the arithmetic, you don't know how to do sort of the actual functioning, the actual how the code works, that when you get onto the job, or if you even try to interview, it's not going to like, you're not going to pass an interview because you can't have ChatGPT there. So if you do rely on it too much, very similar to Dojo Hall, it's actually going to hinder you, but it can be a very powerful tool for learning how to code and learning how to ask things. A couple of people asked, will ChatGPT eventually replace developers, and what is it? I'd love to talk about that maybe after class today. I don't want to spend too much time on ChatGPT. I'd love to show it. I'm a big fan of it. You can do a ton of cool things with it. But I haven't messed with Bard, obviously, but this is just sort of the beginning. I don't think it'll replace developers. I have a theory on sort of why it won't, but we can talk about that after class. Just wanted to address that. Any questions on that, or sort of statements on sort of as we get prepared? Cool. Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and jump into sort of how everything is going to work. And we'll actually jump into our first sort of, piece of lecture, which will be really, really fun. I'm just going to say full. Cool. So can anybody tell me, just in chat, or you can come off the mic, I'm very okay with you guys talking as long as it's not disruptive, or, you know, if I'm in the middle of a statement, please just respect that. But usually what I'll do, sort of, as you guys will see, is after a topic, I'll say, hey, are there any questions? And that's a great time to come off of mute, because you can then ask questions. But, you know, if I'm in the middle of talking, it can be distracting if you're like, wait, what does that mean? So please just note that. Also, if you put it in chat, I'll always stop at the end of each topic, read the chat, make sure that there's no questions there. But can anybody tell me what a full stack application is? And maybe some of the pieces of a full stack application? So knowing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, not quite. Yeah, Kat, there's some back end, there's a front end. So it's a little bit more robust than just knowing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. That's often just front end stuff. So front end, some type of middleware, and a back end. Yeah, great. Front end and database. Yep. Front end, back end, database. I think that's kind of the easiest way to sort of talk about this. So I'd like to give an overview. And also I just want to note that I understand that some of you guys have been, this is your third stack, and some people, this is your first sort of stack. So I'm balancing both of those. And so if this is redundant to you, then I'm sorry. We can talk about more advanced topics at other times, but if it's not, then hopefully you can learn from anything. So great. So here we're going to have sort of our full stack application, where I've got a couple different pieces that I want to draw out. This looks cool, so let's do this. Boo, that was not cool. That's okay. So we are going to have our front end. So front end, let's change that color because it's kind of tough to read. Then we're going to have our back end. Oftentimes this is like an API or some sort of server. And then we might have some sort of database, because I would say in most instances, you're going to have a database. And so what will happen is our user sees sees the front end, right? That's the front end is really what the user sees. Jackie, that is your HTML, your CSS, your JavaScript library. So in this case, it's going to be React. And when they want to do something, oftentimes what they have to do is, let's say they want to create, I love to use Facebook as an example because everybody's sort of familiar with it. Say I want to create a profile, right? I'm viewing and I'm seeing what is a form, right? And I'm seeing, okay, there's things I have to fill out. Once I press submit, it sends that information to our backend. Our backend is going to have some sort of logic that says, okay, if it has a URL that says, facebook.com/create user, well, then what do I want to do when that happens, right? And what it might do, it doesn't always do this, but in this instance for create user, it says, okay, I have this information. I have this first name, last name, email, age, whatever. I need to write that to my database. So then it goes and it writes it to the database. Then the database will do that and it'll give some sort of success code back to the backend. The backend will say, okay, wonderful. Now what do you want me to do? And then maybe it says now redirect back to the dashboard. And it says, okay, great. Let me do that. And then it transfers information to our front end. So that is a very, very high level of what we are going to be doing. Now, this is going to be for MERN. We have React. That is the R in MERN. Our backend is going to be node.js. So just a JavaScript backend. Our database is going to be MongoDB, which is a very, very popular, probably the most popular NoSQL database. NoSQL means not only SQL. So some people think it just means like not SQL, but it means not only SQL, because you can do some SQL queries on MongoDB, but that'll be that. And then somebody said this, Jonathan said this, which is great, is you sometimes have to have some middleware. And what middleware is what it does is it allows us to connect. Let me actually move this. It allows us to connect our front end and our back end. So here we're going to have Express. So that is MERN. We have our M for Mongo. Express is our sort of connector piece. We've got our React as our front end, and then our Node is our back end. So this is how a full stack application works. Now there's a ton of different things that you can go for that. Like sometimes in an actual sort of application perspective, you might have multiple databases or redundant databases that it even, not to get too into the weeds, but we can send something to the database and it has to do something here, get something back, and then sends it back. So there's tons of different ways, but from a easy perspective of what we're doing, we are just going to be doing this right here. We're going to have our front end. We're going to have React as our front end. We're going to have our middleware that connects our back end of Node. Then we're going to speak to a database. We're going to save stuff. We're going to update. We're going to delete. We're going to use these things called CRUD applications, which is create, read. So it's like, I want to get my information, update. So I want to edit my information, and delete. And all of this is going to work succinctly. All the user sees is whatever the front end shows them, but this is all the stuff that's happening on the back end. Somebody asked, is MERN always used together? Could you use Python with React and MongoDB? You could absolutely do that. It's actually a really popular thing, is to use Python and React together. MongoDB is honestly, in my opinion, a great thing to know, because less and less people are wanting to use some sort of SQL tabular database. The reason being, data used to be really, really expensive. So you used to, computer space, whether it was on premise, means that you had your own servers, or even in the cloud, it was expensive. And so what you would want to do is, make sure that everything was set up perfectly together, and you you would query or sort of clean your data before it went into your database, and it was like nice and tidy. Now, storing things in the cloud with AWS or Azure is so cheap that people just want to retain and keep all the data they want. MongoDB, which we'll get to like week 3 or 4, allows you to just kind of, it's semi-structured, so it doesn't have as tough as a structure, as MySQL. And so it allows you sort of just to save anything and everything, and then you can deal with that later. But that's a great question. MongoDB is incredible. It's one of the most popular. In AWS, you can create a cluster and it just uses document DB. And so all kinds of things with that as well. But yes, that's a great question. You can use React. React is going to be your library. Again, it connects to, it uses, we're going to learn about this thing called Babel this week that sort of takes code and converts it. But yes, you can have a backend of really sort of any main language, Node.js, Python, Java even. So really cool. Are there any questions on sort of what is a full stack application? Anything, any thoughts, any questions here? Okay, great. Just for sake of time, I'm going to move forward. One thing to note is if this is your first stack, then you probably have no idea what I'm about to talk about. And that's okay. If it's your second or third stack, then this is kind of more for you is how is MERN different than Python and how is it different than Java, right? Whichever one you did. Well, the main difference is when we were doing Python and Java, all you really focused on was this guy right here, right? You just sort of focus on this API, this build of routes and how does it all work? And then you just do it and maybe use Bootstrap and maybe use a little bit of vanilla JavaScript or, you know, jQuery even to show on the front end, but you didn't really do much. And every time you had to spin up sort of a local server on your computer, you just kind of had to spin up one thing, right? You did localhost 5,000 for Flask, or you spun up Java, and that's really all you had to focus on. What's different here, and this is where Express really comes in, is we actually have two things we have to spin up. Spin up meaning that we're going to have two servers running. We're going to have something called our client server. And then we're actually just going to call this server. But this is sort of our backend, right? So our client server is going to be our React. This is going to be what the user sees. And then our server is going to be our backend. That's sort of all of our logic. And these are going to move, we're going to move information to one and the other. And with that, we also are going to, so we're going to move information from one to the other, and then we'll actually have both running. So we're going to actually have two terminals running. So that way we can connect the two, and that's where Express comes in. It's because you have one server, you have a second server, and then it has to connect the two. And so even if we get into like cloud architecture, you will have to do a little bit more than Python or Java. So any questions on that? Can you guys put a 1 in the chat if that makes sense? Put a 0 if you are so confused. Great. 0.5. That's fine. Greg, can you the 0.5s, can you just go on and get a little bit of clarification and maybe help if needed? Perfect.
No problem.
Thanks. Great. So I'll go ahead and clear this. Somebody asked, why is more than one server required? In order for us to run React, it needs its own server to run. And then in order for us to do Node, it needs its own as well. And so by server, I mean like your local host computer. That's what we call a server. So like local host, you'll run on 8,000 and 3,000 will be what we need. So it's in order for us to run the library. So great question. Great question. Cool. Great. Let me clear all my drawings. Great. So now let's just jump into a little bit of what we want to do. I'm going to pull these side by side. And this is going to be a very basic sort of walkthrough. This is a refresher for the next 19 minutes of JavaScript. We're going to dive in more tomorrow. Anything I don't cover tonight, I will cover tomorrow. Just wanted to talk through a couple of different things there. But JavaScript is a really, really fun language. Somebody posted a really funny meme that was like the panda bear that was like losing their mind on it. And it is because JavaScript was built in 6 days. So there are some issues. There are some issues with it. It was built by, I was lucky enough to go to AWS reInvent this past year and got to kind of talk to one of the main guys of Netscape. And he was telling the story of how there were just not enough tools out there there was not a tool that worked. And so they had one of their engineers literally just build JavaScript in like 6 days and said, hey, we need this out and we need this going, because they were competing with some other person. I think it was Microsoft, actually. They were competing with Microsoft. So this person built JavaScript. Obviously, there's been tons of iterations, but it does at the core have some quirky values. Maybe in one of the, maybe I'll put it, there's a funny video of JavaScript that just like why JavaScript doesn't make sense. I'll put that in the Discord. But it is awesome and very, very similar to Python and how it operates. There are some main things that you're going to get if you've done Python, even if you haven't, if you've done Java, or if you've just done web fundamentals, there's going to be some main things that should feel familiar. It's just, how do we do that? How do we use them? How do we sort of declare them? What do we call them? Normally within development, there's the same topic, just called a different name, oftentimes. So, in the same way that, you might say hola, or you might say hello, they mean the same thing. They do the same thing. They communicate you saying hello. It just is that one is in one language and one is in another. So JavaScript is very similar. Within that, there's some data types that are very similar to anything you've had. We've got strings. Anybody tell me an example of a string? Oh, shows it. Maybe I'll turn off GitHub Copilot next time. Yeah, but here's an example of a string. Sorry, I have Copilot on, so maybe I'll just do that. So this is an example of a string, right? I'm declaring my variable. I've got my variable name, and I say equal to John. Now, anything within quotation marks is considered a string, even if it is a number. And then I finish with this. Now, you might see that sometimes I won't finish with this sort of semicolon. Actually, JavaScript sort of interprets it for you. And so you don't have to do it. So if I didn't have this, it would still work just fine. But it is syntactically better to go ahead and put that for you. That is an important thing. It's just sort of not necessary, but that's how you're supposed to write it, if that makes sense. It's not going to ruin your code. Yes, Cody, it is different. And then we'll talk about let, const, and var as well. So then if I wanted to do a number, then what I can do is I can say var age 23. Now, the reason everything's just popping up is I actually have GitHub Copilot, which is OpenAI, it's ChatGPT, they're all the same company. And so it's already interpreting stuff for me. So I'm not like a wizard. This is what I'm using. So here I can, again, declare a variable age, and now this is a number. Now, anything that we have, if it's a decimal or like if it's a float or if it's a actual integer, we'll just refer to that as a number. And we can obviously do some arithmetic on that. We can multiply, we can subtract, we can do et cetera, et cetera. The last one is a Boolean, which var has kids is false. Now, one thing to note is in Python, you had to have this as a capital F. In JavaScript, you have it as a lowercase f. And so this is sort of your true and false, right? Your Boolean. Yeah, just to do true or false. We're going to talk about truthy tomorrow, like truthy falsy, maybe sometime this week, maybe not tomorrow, but it does have some inherent stuff in the background. But for right now, all you have to worry about is a Boolean is false. Nope, I don't believe you can use false.
No, it'll give you an error.
Yeah, it's the same way that in Python, if you have a lowercase f, it doesn't recognize it. Yes, and Chris asked, is it a lowercase t on true? Yes, it is. So that's at least nice. It's both there. Now, I did post something in the email yesterday. You should have gotten it, where I asked, oh, there is also null. That is a type of variable that you can have, that you're basically creating a variable, but you're not setting it to anything. So that is sort of another type that you can have. So we have strings, numbers, Boolean, and null. And then the last one would be undefined. And so that is where you declare a variable, but you don't have anything in there. This is saving space, or is equal to null. It has nothing, no value. And this is, hey, I want to have a variable. I just don't know. And we'll talk about like hoisting and what that means. But I want to have a variable. I just don't know what I'm going to set it to yet. But let's go ahead and create that value. So these are your 5 types that you can have. Now, there is a difference of, we'll get to objects later. there is a difference between ES5 and ES6. In ES5, we just had var, right? Var was sort of everything. Anytime you wanted to declare a variable, you had var. Now we've got let, oops, and const. And so let is used. Wow, this is incredible. Sorry, I've used Copilot, but it is really crushing my teaching game. So let is used to declare variables that can be reassigned. So let's say I wanted to say something like this. Let name equal John, right? What I can do then is say name equals Jane. And so what this allows me to do, because I use let, I can now, it's called mutable, meaning that I can change it, right? Yeah, sorry that it literally is just teaching you guys. I can change it, right? Because I use let, I can now change the value. Now, if I were to say const is used to declare variables that cannot be reassigned, right? So in this case, if I say const name is John, so let's go ahead and comment these out. And then I wanted to say something like name is Jane. What I would do if I ran this, if I wanted to console.log, and then in the way that you, instead of saying print, you would say console.log. So console.log name, if I were to run this, I would get an error, right? It says assignment to constant variable, meaning I can't redefine what this value is. Now there's going to be a little bit of a confusion tomorrow when we talk about sort of destructuring, and I'm assuming we're probably going to get to arrow functions and we're going to get to arrow functions and destructuring tomorrow. And that's where it's a little bit of a confusing thing when it comes to const, but we will address that as well. Any questions on what we've talked about so far? Somebody says we want to use var sparingly. Yeah, I would say so. There's a great, it just is when you're dealing with functions and what scope you want to use, that's when you would use var versus let. So it just depends on, and in that email I sent yesterday, it sort of talks about the differences and when you would want to use that. But yeah, it just depends on the scope of your function and where you want your variable to live. And yeah, var is more global than let. Let is more so when you just sort of wanted to have it assigned to this one piece and it's not as global. Somebody said, when we're creating var, do we use camel case? Yes. So I would use like first name is how you would want to, versus like in Python, you do this. You just want to use camel case like that. Great question. Chris had a question. Can var be reassigned like let? Yes, it can. It can. So it is what we call mutable, and then const would be called immutable, meaning you can't change it. Now there are some data types well, that's what primitive data types is, what we just talked about. But we also have some data structures. So there's two main ones that we're going to talk about right now. You guys have probably seen. And so objects and arrays. So the first one is arrays. Well, this is literally just teaching you guys, holy smokes. So again, if we want to just have multiple values in our array, in Python, you call this a list. And I think in Java, do you call it an array list? Is that what that is?
Yeah, that's one of them.
Okay. What's nice about these, and not to get too like into the weeds and nuclear with this, is they're what we call dynamic arrays. And so the way that it works, it's very similar to Python, different than Java. Java, you couldn't sort of expand and from a memory perspective, expand and shrink, right? You couldn't do that. But what these are called dynamic, meaning that if I've got values, let's say I've got 3 values, and I want to add a couple more, it allows for that, right? I can change that. And in memory, what it does is it allows you to expand and add in memory or decrease memory of what you're using and what your actual application from a very granular level, the actual memory that it uses. And so the way that it works is that, let's say that you've got 2 values, right? And then in memory, it's going to save it and say, okay, you've got 2 values. That's awesome. But then you say, okay, I want to add a third. what it will do is it actually double its memory. And so if you start with 2, it'll actually make memory for 4. Even though you have 3, it'll make in memory 4. So then when I add in a 4th of Mary, it's cool. I've got that. That's good to know. Like great. I have the space. We're good. Let's say I want to add in a 5th or 6th. What it will do is it'll always double itself. And so now I'll actually, once I go to 4 and I reach capacity, then I will go to 8, right? And then 16 and 32 and so on and so forth. And so that's how it works. Is it allows, it's probably too granular for what you guys need, but that's how it allows you to change your values differently. If you guys are ever in, and I try to do this because oftentimes this is one of your stacked. Oftentimes you guys are getting close to the job. When we're dealing with space complexity, meaning what if you guys are doing an algorithm, they'll ask, what is the time and space complexity? Meaning, how much memory is this taking? This is a space complexity of 1, meaning that because you're going to get to a point where you're doubling, 100, and now it's like 200 and then 400. Because of that, you're going to have so much, it's not going to take up as much space, because whether you do that or not, it's called a constant. But anyway, sorry, that was probably too in depth for what we're doing. Here's our array. We can target this by, let's say I wanted to do something. I wanted to get the name Jane. How would I do that? Anybody know? If I want to get the name Jane, anybody have any idea of what we could do? Yeah, we deal with our index position. Now, these are the same, really amongst anything, is that all index positions start with 1 and then go on and keep going. And then I'm going to put -1 here. So what ends up happening is if I wanted Jane, what I could do is console.log. Then what would I do? Anybody know? God, I'm going to take off GitHub after today because it's just going to give you guys the answers. But what I do is I call the array's name, and then I give my index position. So if I wanted Jane, I'm going to put 1, right? And so what this will do is if I run this, it'll print Jane. Perfect. Now, the reason I did this is we can go all the way up, 5 being sort of the last one, but know that they can also go backwards. So if I wanted to say names -1, what that's actually going to do is give me the last value in my array. So if I do this, it actually gives me undefined. Interesting. Should be giving me true. Let's see. This is a moment where I don't know everything, friends. Undefined. Okay, so maybe that's just a Python thing. Could be just a Python thing then, because Python will allow you to go -1 and then kind of go backwards from that. So sorry, disregard that. Any questions on arrays? I took a little bit too long on the welcome stuff. Sorry about that. So if this feels a little rushed, this is never how I usually lecture, but wanting to make sure that I'm conscious of your time. So any questions on arrays? Okay. Last thing is I'm going to say an object. Google says no negative indices on JavaScript. Lame. Okay, so let's say I wanted to create a variable or a object of John. Now, I could use an array because I can store tons of different types of information, right? I can store names, or strings, I can store numbers, I can store Booleans, I can store null, I can store a whole bunch of different things. But it's not really easy to sort of look up information. If I have first name, last name, address, it's hard to know the index of what that is. And so that's where objects come in. Because what I can do is I can say, okay, I want to store some information like name. And so what I do is I create an object by using var. You can use let as well, or const. And so you can say, John, I have this. Does anybody know what this is called? Anybody remember? Attribute. Yeah, key value pair. These are key value pairs. So this is our key. This is what we're going to refer to. And this is our value, right? So its name is John. Let's add some more information. Last name Smith, year of birth, 1990, job is teacher, is married is false. Great. So we have this object, John. Now there's a couple different ways I can call some information. As you see, GitHub Copilot has done everything for me. Again, I will have this turned off. This is stealing all my thunder. But what we can do is we can console.log, and then we can say the object, and we can use the dot notation to call the actual key. So if I do this and I run this, you can see that it prints out Smith. Again, I'm using this plus sign, or this play sign is just from the code runner as well. And so what I can do is I can say anything. I can say last name, I can say job. I can also say something like this, where I wanted to do it in bracket notation. So if I wanted to not use dot notation, I can call the key, and you guys might be familiar with this if you did. Somebody asks, is JavaScript object the same as object in OOP? Yeah, same thing, because they're both written in JavaScript. And so I can call it by the actual key name itself. If I wanted to, I can do either one. I can do either one. But this allows a lot more sort of robustness, because what I can do is I can say, if I wanted to add family, if I wanted to add a function, I can do that. I can do all of that stuff, all of that information, all within an object. Like, it allows you to store all of this stuff. Somebody asked, which one would you prefer to use? Do dot notation or the other way? I would say get used to dot notation, because that's something we're going to use quite a bit. And it is way easier. Just like Cody said, it is much easier to use dot notation than it is to use sort of this key bracket pair. It's just less steps. And as developers, we love less code to type, exactly like what Cody said. Cool. Are there any questions? I know what we talked about from this side was very, very, very basic. And we talked about full stack and what that expects. We'll hop into functions and destructuring tomorrow on top of our other sort of data that we're going to talk about. Are there any questions on this? Can you just put a 1 in the chat if this makes sense? Put a 0 if it does not. Cool. Somebody asked, can you change the function to an arrow function? You can. Well, I'm not going to do it today because we're going to talk about arrow functions tomorrow, but yeah, we can change it to an arrow function. That's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. Great question though. We'll talk about why an arrow function versus a normal function. So what are the benefits? There's just really a couple benefits other than what we're going to use and sort of how it looks nice. So somebody asked, how can you pass data into that function? So you would just call that function and then pass in the data that you needed. So right now this doesn't take any data, but you would just call john.calculate age, and then you would pass in the information, and then you guys can, and then it'll run that function with you. And that's really where, if there's a great video, I'll try to find it. Maybe I can post it for you guys of arrow functions. And that's really where an arrow function comes in play. Again, way too granular, but when you have like a this keyword in JavaScript, an arrow function attaches it to the object above. But that's a little bit too granular for what we're going to do. But I'll try to find that video and post that in there. But yep, you can have a function, you can pass in information by just using this same thing. Great questions. Yeah, just as a reminder, if you guys are not muted, please mute, and then gray if there's anybody that's not muted, if you can mute them. I try to be really conscious of your time. I know that you guys are, you came to the part-time accelerated program for some reason or another. And so I try to be conscious. I know I'm 2 minutes over, but is there any questions before I finish this? Again, tomorrow, we're going to talk about arrow functions, just functions in general. We're going to talk about destructuring. They're not very heavy topics, so I'm very okay with doing them tomorrow. Any questions on this before I let you guys go? Okay, yeah, I'll wait. Thanks, Cody.
Oh, sorry. I know there was someone, I'm pretty sure I DM'd him, that they did not have access to Discord. So I'm just reminding them to let you know so you can give them access to the Discord channel.
Yeah, if you could actually send me a private message or just put it, if you aren't comfortable, go ahead and send a private message. But if you are comfortable, just put it in the chat right now, and then I can add you immediately. Also, one thing to note with Discord is if you use a different, for your Discord, this always happens with students. If you use a different email for Discord than you did for Coding Dojo, we will create the Discord for you based on the email that you gave us. So if you have two different emails and you use your normal Discord, you just have to let me know and I can put your red email. Okay, Tim, I will, let me write that down and then I will go give you access right now.
Okay, all right. So
Cool.
that was you. I was like, just making sure.
Yeah.
I DM'd you just in case.
Yeah.
Good night, Jose.
Okay, perfect. Yep, I have that written down. I'll go do this right after class. All right, friends. Well, I will stick around here for a couple minutes. Let's pause the recording. I'll stop there.